Hey, everybody. Welcome to Spin is a Four-Letter Word, Have a Beer With version. Cheers. Cheers. With me, as always, is Jen Renahan, our COO. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
And today, our very important guest is Bill Hooper. Bill is the General Manager and Vice President right here at WMAR-TV, the local ABC affiliate in Baltimore. Bill and I go way back. He has graciously agreed to join us today. Bill, thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
Behind the scenes is Emma C., our deadly but silent and out-of-the-picture producer.
I should be in the picture.
There she is, waving wildly. Hoop, first and foremost, cheers. Good to be with you. Thanks for being on Spin is a Four-Letter Word.
Absolutely. I mean, if you serve beer, I'm here.
He's an easy sell, folks. I've gotten to know him quite well. And you bring a beer, he's in. Bill, before we get into the media world today and whatnot, two things. One, I want everybody to know, because I never wear a tie, that Hooper mandated it. He said, look, I'll do your stupid podcast, but you got to dress up a little bit. So here I am. Not true. We had a luncheon with the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation earlier today, which was great fun. But Bill, tell us about your journey. I mean, it's kind of a really cool one because we're here in this building at WMAR in your studios, and it's a full circle tale. Tell us about it.
So I went to school, Randolph-Macon College to play basketball. So I didn't know what I was going to do, right? I get out of school. My dad was in the advertising agency business. So I was trying to get into the agency business. That wasn't going well. And another guy at the agency said, why don't you try some media? I had done promotions work at B104, the old B104. Yeah. And so I go run over there to try to get a job. They're not hiring a rookie, and never sold anything in my life. So there was a brand new station. There was a station 106.5 in the basement of this building. It was owned by the Able Corporation that also owned the TV station and the Baltimore Sun. And they were changing format from a beautiful, like the real beautiful music stations, the real soft ones and elevator music. And they were going right to top 40. I mean, a complete change. So they hired me as a rookie. So I started in the basement here at WMAR, spent 20 years in radio, ran a Mix 106, started 92Q. And then yearly kind of was hitting the ceiling with my head on the radio business. Didn't really want to move out of the market because the kids were, in high school, and it was just not the right time. And then MAR had an opening for the director of sales. They called me. Make a long story short, here I am since 2004. So I started out as director of sales, did that for 2 years, and then got bumped up to GM in 2007.
That's a cool journey. It's a great journey. And, Bill's dad, he mentioned he's in the advertising agency. Bill's dad was a big shot in advertising for many, many years. Still one of the most active guys ever at his ripe old age. And give us a minute about your pops, because I love you tell me great stories about him, how he kind of encouraged you, and his career alone was just crazy.
So Dad got into the agency business. I forget how he got in. His father knew somebody who had Verstandic had an ad agency, and he started in D.C. and he bumped it around to a couple different places, and then he went to WB Donor. And Donor was growing in Baltimore. Herb Freed was the head of the office. They had National Beer. They had a bunch of local Baltimore accounts that Dad joined in. And then he started bringing in new business, McCormick, Equitable Bank, brought in all these other different, companies. So eventually he ended up being the president of the Baltimore office. So, and then after that, he left and he went into the consulting business and still doing it, even though he's 87 years old.
Wow.
And he is still consulting, and he is with a group of guys that specialize in bringing emerging food products to market. Wow. So they had a deal, Klondike pancake mix. And it was like a family recipe. Wow. And these guys, were regionally marketing it, and they were selling it, and it's a really good pancake mix. So they wanted to go national, but they didn't know how to get into Walmarts or the big grocery chains and all that. So Dad is on this team, and they invest in these companies, and then they also get a piece of the action, and then they eventually sell them. And the family makes a whole bunch of money, and then Dad's group makes some decent money.
87, still doing that. I mean, that's just the coolest thing. And yeah, I think Dad might have to be next up on Spin is a Four-Letter Word. As you could tell, Bill Hooper is a Baltimorean through and through. So when we said, what kind of beer do you want to be on with a beer with? He said, well, Natty Bo, naturally. So here we are enjoying our Natty Bo. Yeah, there it is. Hope, generally on our podcast, we talk to a lot of folks in the media or on the PR marketing side of things. And one question I'd love to ask, kick things off, is just kind of the evolution of the media and like how you've seen things change. I mean, from your perspective, the local news, the evolution of it, how you've had to kind of adjust over the last 20 plus years to, survive and thrive. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that whole transition, looking back over the last couple of decades and with the world changing.
So, when I got into the business, the Baltimore Sun was the king. They were the official, actually when I got into business, it was still the News American and the Baltimore Sun. Right. So there were two papers. Oh, yeah. And the Baltimore Sun had a morning edition and an afternoon edition. There was so much print. So they were the big boys and everyone aspired to get to them. And then television was still, doing well, but it was really three stations that had news departments. Right. 45 didn't have a news department at that point. And then you had the radio. So now, there's barely a newspaper with the Baltimore Sun. It is, pretty thin. Yeah. And they only have one paper a day. The radio business is extremely difficult, and COVID really changed that business because there was no one driving for a couple of years. Yeah. They've worked on reinventing themselves through streaming, and they have some, digital products that are pretty good. But, the days of those big disc jockeys, owning the town, Brian and O'Brien, they're just those, can't afford those guys anymore. And then certainly our business has changed dramatically, with the streaming and, obviously the internet. And that was probably the first thing that really started impacting us. When I first came in 2007 as GM, we were as a company going through a transition of what we called Newsroom of the Future. Yeah. So not that long ago, 2007, we were converting ourselves from the television business. The news business was a stop-start business. You worked up to the next deadline. Right. 5 o'clock news, work. Now you got the 5 o'clock news. Now we're going to work for the 11 o'clock news. Then we're going to work for the morning news. Right. We wanted to break that mold and become 24/7. When we have news, it goes to the web. Now it goes to the phone. It goes wherever we want to, where it should be. And then we'll still go on the air. So we have a OTT channel now. So there's just, so much. The web has changed so much, and the phone has really changed everything. So that's a big part of it. And then the other part is because there's so many outlets. And one of the things that was a big staple in our business was, the trust and loyalty for the viewer. Yeah. And that is tumbling in our business. Yeah. It starts really with the network side. The network side is really low. But it's now, we were immune to it for a couple of years, but now it's starting to spread into our business. So when we do research, we're still way ahead of the network business, but not like we used to be.
How do you handle, obviously newsrooms across the country are shrinking. So, so how do you handle the responsibility that comes with all of your reporters? We've seen that kind of their camera people, their reporters, their own social media. So do you have any kind of thoughts on how you guys kind of manage that process? So
there's a couple things that are like anything else. There's never one thing that's changing everything. So one piece of it is, and we're right now as a company, we're in a mode of restructuring. What we're working to do is to try to reallocate resources from back end to more people on the street. Mm-hmm. So we recognize that newsrooms are getting smaller. They're cutting reporters, cutting anchors in some cases. We're trying to go the opposite direction, but we just can't add to it. Sure. We need to find the money. So technology is really what's helping us do that. So behind the scenes, there's so much new technology that you can, you just can do things with less people. Yeah. And then we're trying to retrain a lot of our photographers. Are doing much more than they've ever did. They're on social media. They're doing video that will never even make the news.
Right.
It's just for social, or it's for, the web or whatever. So we're getting more out of all of our people. It is more demanding to be a reporter or even a photographer because of all those different places that you need to be. But we're also trying to expand, and this is a company-wide thing.
Yeah.
Scripts wide, right? Yeah. Hoop, I want to touch on it. I want to go back to the trust issue in the media, which you talked about a second. We'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about your sales efforts here at WMAR. I mean, we try to partner with you guys a lot with our clients because we know how hard your guys work and what a great product you put forth. What I always appreciate, like what most recently with the Maryland 5-star equestrian event, is the creativity, right? I mean, it's not just about spots. You come with a plan, Stacy Walsh and Andrew Kincaid and the whole team there and Mike Earing just come with a plan and different options and way to get creative, and they work hand in glove with the news department, what's newsworthy. And I think it's a very unique approach. I guess the question I have for you is, how much time do you guys spend on saying, hey, look, we need to get creative. We need to bring more than just a 30-second spot to the table. How do we do this? Like, talk through that process, because I think you guys do it really, really effectively.
So when I first got here, the station was selling spots, pretty much it,
Right.
And we were by far in last place in the news. So, the rates were low. I mean, it was, BAL, back then Jay-Z was still number one, way ahead of everyone else. So I'm thinking, okay, well, how are we going to compete?
Right.
And, my radio background, that's what radio does. They do remotes, they do contests, they do all these kind of things. So I said, well, why can't we do those? First of all, no one really knew how in the station. They didn't feel like they had to. But I knew that if we sat, and not every advertiser, but there's several advertisers saying, well, what else can you do besides, and I'll look past your ratings if you can do some exciting things. So we started doing remotes. We started doing contests. We started, when appropriate, incorporating news or weather people. We did those on the goes. And we got out of the box. So we started getting a reputation of the most creative sales department and team in the marketplace. And then we've taken that even further, as now what we're working to do is to do these community events where we're trying to help the community help itself. So we do collections for the House of Ruth. We did a thing for Level the Playing Field, which collects, youth sports equipment. And then we bring our sponsors into that. So they're getting more than just spots. They're getting a community involvement.
Right.
They're getting, interviews on the air when we broadcast all day live. So it continues to evolve. But we also didn't, we probably guessed right in that our competition, didn't need to do that. And they weren't built to do it. Right. So we had to rebuild internally so we could pull off what we said we were going to do. And
it kind of goes into what you were saying earlier, the strategy of getting more of your reporters and more people out in the community, right? So now you have it built in where you send Jamie Costello, you send someone out, right? And it's all getting that name recognition, I think, is super important for, for you said loyalty, right? And
it helps us. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Bill, one thing that jumps out to me about, and I think you're a big part of it, is the longevity of the folks at the station. I mean, from news director Kelly Groff to, you look on the air, and Jen just mentioned Jamie, who's been here since the Stone Age. And, folks just stay here. And it's Stacy Walsh. And what do you attribute that to? Because I think, obviously, you've created a nice work environment. People must have some sort of freedoms, but do you ever sit back and notice that? And, I think it's something that you must be proud of.
I am proud of it. I wouldn't say that I created it, but I recognize that when I got here, that there was a big piece of the station was built on this, I call it family feel. The station is, for people who don't know, we're in a neighborhood. I mean, we're right next to Rogers Forge,
right.
And the Giant Foods on the other side. So we're like a neighborhood station. So why not act and feel like a neighborhood station? Plus, we have people who've been here for a long time and a lot of history and a lot of talent. And, we look to utilize as much of that and pull that out. So we spend time, and Rob Brockmeyer is really, really good at managing the studio people, the photographers, all those, to get the most out of them, find out who really has a good talent for this or that, and then let them go. And, because most places, you're doing the formula. There's a look, and they're never going to change, and they're not doing anything that's a little bit out of the box. One of the things that's really important for our group is every year, and we'll have it coming up again in this month, is the Turkey Bowl. So we do the Loyola Calvert Hall game, 10 o'clock on Thanksgiving morning, but we rent an NFL truck to produce that game. I mean, we spend a lot of money on that, and we have like an NFL look to our game. Well, our guys go crazy for that. Yeah. They don't get that at other stations. Yeah. They're like, oh my God, I'm going inside of an NFL truck. I'm going to be able to play with all the, that's what, guys behind the, and girls that are behind the, that's what they love. And then you can get out and it's our game. We can do whatever we want with it. And, we do instant, replays, that plays over, boom, let's see it again. That's all coming from the technology of those NFL trucks. So they add up. And I think when I first came in, I saw that and I said, well, let's just not let it sit there. Let's see how much we can add to it and put more wood on the fire.
That's cool. Circling back to kind of the world in which you live in the media space, you mentioned it earlier, right? A loss of trust by the general public with the media in general. And it's kind of more on the national level and maybe on the network level. But I guess, why do you think that happened, and what do you do about it?
That's a really, really good question, and I think if we had the answer, we would be doing it. Right. So I think, honestly, where news departments over time went to easy news. Easy news is, in Baltimore City, there's going to be crime every day. So let's go down to the police headquarters and stand in front of the police headquarters every day. So I won't say which station, right, but there's a station that parks their live van truck outside of police headquarters at the end of the expressway every day. And that's the coverage. That's the coverage. So it's a little bit of that. It's going to the press conferences and just not, just reporting what's there and not giving anyone more. So when we do research, people come back and they say, I want to know more why. Give us more in depth. So we have we do every newscast, we do an in focus story. Mm-hmm. So in focus is more in depth. So we will take the news of the day, but we will take it, a little bit deeper on explaining why. So that's part of it. But then as we're trying to separate ourselves, there's this wave coming that's already here, which is AI. And we are, as an industry, very concerned about that because, there's a whole generation, like my kids, that have grown up with these, the phones and the web. So if it's on the web, it's true.
Right.
I read it on my phone. It must be true. It's on Twitter. It's got to be true, right? And they don't have the standards that we do as journalists, at the broadcasts and the local stations. They don't have that. So, and if they make a mistake, it doesn't really
and there's not a trusted voice. There's not Walter Cronkite talking to a nation anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that is, so we're definitely swimming upstream on that. It is difficult. But what you said earlier, Jen, is, if we're in the community and people know us and they say, oh, I know Jamie Costello. Yeah. And Jamie is not like, this suit, that just walks around and looks perfect. He's a guy, you'll see him eating crabs or, doing whatever. And at a ball game, watching his little kids, play T-ball. Yeah. And, he's just one of us, in the marketplace. And that helps us, I think, and it would help any media company to just go out and touch people, be real, and then also help them in their communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too there's always the struggle and to get it first, right? So you're trying to be first with the news, and how you combat that with, having your reporters out and they're on Twitter, they're on social. So do you guys do anything
For
kind
the
of
first versus right sort of thing, right?
have a strategy
when I
for-
first got here and I was learning the news business, that was absolutely the rule. First, you got to be first.
Yeah.
You got to, you got to beat everyone else to it. That has completely switched.
Yeah.
And especially in our company, they say verify, don't be first. So there's examples. There's plenty of examples. A big one was when Sergeant Suter was killed.
Yeah.
And there was a report that that he was shot. He was, knocking on the door, had a warrant, I think, supposedly, and the door opened and he was shot. And one of the other stations went to air on that right away because they were first. Completely wrong. He was shot in an alley. He didn't knock on the door. I mean, so we slowed down and we said, we don't know if that's right. That's got to be correct because, again, the trust.
Right. Right.
So,
Goes a
but
long
there's
way.
still organizations that are like first.
Well, but Hoop, isn't it even harder? And by the way, we're talking with Bill Hooper, Vice President and General Manager at WMAR, the ABC affiliate right here in Baltimore. But Hoop, like with Twitter, the whole being right before you being first is almost like, it feels almost counterintuitive in the culture today. It's got to be a little bit challenging, right? Because you're going to want to like, oh, I'm hearing this. I'm 90% sure it's true. And your Scripps is telling you guys to pump the brakes. It feels like a unique approach.
It is a little unique. And then there's what we view, it's not always the case, but in general, we feel like we're not going to beat the Twitters and all that. I'll give you an example of where it really makes some sense. You get an alert on your phone about the Ravens or the Orioles. We don't have the capacity the Orioles are putting this out themselves.
Right.
We can't scoop the Orioles, right?
Yeah.
The Orioles are the ones leading the charge. So what we can do, though, is get in and talk about why, or have Sean Stepner will say, he'll call in and say, well, okay, so-and-so did this, but that's just the headline.
Right.
Where's the story behind
Deeper
it?
story.
Yeah.
And we try to do that more often and just say, okay, we know we can't win to be first, but we have research that shows us that when people especially when they wake up in the morning, they look, they see their, headlines, they see what's happening in the world, and then they'll say, yeah, but I want to know more about.
Yeah.
And then they turn to their most trusted media local source. And we hope that's us, or it could be BAL, it could be someone else, but that's really the handoff. But we better be there with extra stuff instead of just saying the same thing that they just read, because then they're gone.
Well, it's true. I mean, I look at my phone when whatever news breaks and you see Sun Banner, BBJ, like it's like all in reporting the same exact headline, right?
Yeah.
And then, but it's an interesting, I love the strategy. Yeah.
Bill, before we wrap up, I have a couple more questions, but from your perspective, what's next? What's next for a station like WMAR for the Scripps universe? I know you guys recently have started the national show, which is pretty interesting and pretty cool, Scripps News. But like, what else? Like, what do you? How do you see your industry evolving, and how do you see WMAR evolving?
So again, that's a good question.
I got a bunch of them. Hard-hitting questions for Bill Hoop.
So I'll go all the way back to before I got into this business, and I knew that I had the opportunity to get in, and but I wasn't sure about it. And I was having lunch with a guy, Jim Brennan. I don't know if you know Jim, advertising agency guy. And I said, here's my situation, Jim. And, I've got 20 years in radio and, I hate to walk away from it, but, television, and Jim said, he says, I don't know where the industry's going. Right. He says, but I can tell you one thing. He says, video is the place to be. And he said, it's not going away. He said, people don't want to read as much as they have to read on some of these, websites and all that. He says, if you give them the choice of reading versus a video, most people will take a video. Not all, but most.
Now, serious question. Did Emma tell you to say that? Like, Emma is our multimedia expert, and she's glowing but it is true. I mean, we're seeing it. Emma, you could tell you firsthand, like, we're seeing it more and more. We're seeing our clients wanting to tell their stories
on video. Digitally
on video as much as everything, right? Yep. So now we have to fold that into almost every client and keeping her hopping. So, yeah, it is interesting to see, and who knows where, what's next. And from technology, there's probably a kid in his mom's basement right now coming up with something we haven't even thought of.
It's interesting you even see, because we follow all the social stuff and what you guys are doing, not only just on your broadcast but on social, and just seeing like news stories being told through TikTok and it's wild. But, like you taking that segment and then breaking it down.
So even those big social media sites are evolving. So when Facebook used to be our number one source of traffic to our website. So if we put a story up, a news story, then Facebook would lead the way because we can track where all the people are coming from. So Facebook has done a lot of research, obviously, and they are cutting back on news because it's negative. And they think Facebook should be a place where you see your friends, your family, connect with old friends, catch up with people. They want to bring it back
because Facebook's kind of an angry place.
They don't want to hear that, the kids got shot at Carver.
Right. And their whole algorithm is favoring, they don't want you to link out. They want you to stay within, comment, stay within.
So we have changed our strategy on Facebook, and you'll see our stuff is much more community-oriented, lighthearted, fun stuff. Shop Small with Stevie. She does those kind of things. Yeah. We have our new meteorologist, Chris Swaim, and he's really into nature and birds and all. And we built in the back, we have like birds' nests or bird feeders, and it's not on TV, but he does a video once a week talking about, hey, it's fall. This is what you're going to be seeing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you want to feed if you're looking for these kind of birds, use this kind of, here's, all that. I mean, that's the stuff that we're feeding.
Yeah,
there.
But it goes back to what you were saying. It's not just the headline. You don't need to push the headline out on Facebook.
Right.
Give them something.
So it is changing. Yeah. So and then it'll continue to change. I mean, like everything else. So we're all learning, but I think we need to be nimble. And we need to be able, can't get stuck in saying, well, that's the way it's always been. We have to be open.
Bill, what about young people coming out of school? And are they are there still some really smart, great journalism majors coming out or multimedia folks? And are they wanting to go to WMAR? Like, what are you seeing in kind of like as far as the job pools go these days?
It's very, very hard to find certain positions. So writers, producers, very, very difficult. It's a really hard job.
Good sales folks too, I would think.
Salespeople are really difficult to find, especially in our business because we have to do a lot of cold calling. So that's hard. On air, people still want to be on TV.
I bet even more because
that's the easiest.
Everyone's used to this generation filming yourself, filming your friends, being.
Personally, I have a face for radio, so I never really wrestled with that.
But people do. That's probably not the easiest, but that's the least of our worries. And then the other piece is that behind the scenes, the technical people and the engineering is a job that is just aging away. I mean, we're lucky because we have a young group of people, but in our company, if a chief engineer retires, they're like without a chief engineer for a long time.
Wow.
And, we still rely on the transmitter, and we have a tower, and we have all, that was one big eye-opener. I know I'm rambling. Coming from radio to TV was the technical side. I was like, whoa. I mean, radio is really simple.
Yeah.
And I can even follow it. not in TV. And these guys can tell me, we need to buy this, A1 402Y. How much is it? $45,000. Okay. It's like when you go to the car, and the guy says, hey, your this and this is broken. Okay, I guess
great.
It's good. I don't know. I had no idea.
Before we let you go, we're going to put you a little bit on the spot.
Better have a sip of beer.
Yeah, have a little sip of beer first, and then Jen, I'll let you ask another question if you have one. Then we'll let Bill get back to his day job. What's your favorite story that you've kind of covered since, and post radio, in TV, since being at MAR? What do you have a story or two that was just your most favorite to be around and really embrace?
It was
whether it's hard or happy or not happy, right? Either challenging, whatever.
It wouldn't be a story, but it was an event. It was something that caused stories. So if you remember when Trump was president, and he had that, he was ragging on Baltimore, and he came out and he said, and I think it was in a tweet or something, and he said, it's a cesspool, rat infested, everything. He says, especially West Baltimore. He picked on West Baltimore. So it made national news, certainly news here. So as a news team, we got together and we're like, and our news director, Kelly, she led the charge, and she said, you're going to see the mayor, you're going to see the governor, you're going to see the Congress people. They're all going to come back and say, he's wrong. They don't know what they're talking. He's never even been here, and everyone's going to have pretty much the same coverage. Kelly said, we're not going to talk to any of those people because that's what they have to say.
Right.
She said, let's go into the market and let's find people who live there and talk to them. So the first day, and she said, we're going to do that every day this week.
Oh, that's cool.
So, and as long as the story has legs, we'll keep doing it. So first day we go in, we find this lady, she's probably in her upper 60s, maybe 70s. And, we ask her, what do you feel, about the statements of the president? And she said, I've lived here for over 50 years. She said, he's right. She said, this place is a mess. She said, there's rats running across the street. She said, it is, the streets are falling apart. She says, the crime is terrible. She says, I don't know where all this money is going, but it's not coming here.
Wow.
She said, so anyone who says, oh, yeah, we've been, investing in and all, she said, no way. Then we found another guy who played football at Loyola High School, had an injury which caused him to be paralyzed.
Oh, my.
And Van Brooks, I don't know if you know Van. Van is an unbelievable young man. And so he grew up in West Baltimore, was going to Loyola. And so, he had this tragic accident. So he goes back to West Baltimore, and he's built a mentoring program, after-school mentoring program for 20, 25 kids. And, he put his stake in the ground to say, I'm going back to my home, and I'm going to change lives. I can't do them all, but I can do 20, 25 kids during the school year. So these kids who have nowhere to go after school, they can go, they join the program, and he's very strict about how to stay in the program. And then when you get out of the program, you have to keep helping out the new kids, the next class that comes in.
That's awesome.
So we found 5 stories like that were completely different than anyone else. And we got a lot of feedback from the community saying that was awesome. Because everyone else said Elijah Cummings. And
right, what the politicians are going to say, right? Yeah, on both sides. Yeah, and
that was a big week. We were really proud of ourselves that week.
That's really cool. That's a great story, and that goes back to that whole creativity angle, right? I mean, you guys are just thinking of ways to get embraced in the community and tell a story differently and deeper in a more meaningful way, right? You can get politicians say anything on any day, but you get into the heart of the town and the real stories emerge. That's really cool.
Yep.
My last question was kind of similar, but if you had a biggest accomplishment since you've been GM?
Biggest accomplishment.
Aside from this podcast.
I'm still here, so that's one, especially in the media business. I would say the accomplishment is what we talked about earlier, is the amount of people who have had other opportunities and have stayed here.
Yeah.
And, I've watched, Kelly and her kids grow up. She's been our news director since 2009.
Yeah.
And that is really unusual in our business. And, I remember when our kids were younger, and now one's out of college, one's, a sophomore in college. Yeah. And, they're part of the family, I mean, it's all. So I would say I'm most proud of the people and the accomplishments that they've made.
Yeah, that's awesome. We were just talking the other day about Jamie, I'm sure you guys saw it, that going around. There's an old he was at Burger King
yeah.
story, right?
That story went
When they use the credit
crazy.
card,
Yeah. And so it was about when the credit card first came out for fast food places.
So-
and now it's being repurposed on through TikTok and social.
So one other thing that I don't know if you want to end it on this, but is an interesting part of the business that we're working on is we were the first TV station on the air in Maryland, 11th in the country, and our archives go all the way back.
Yeah.
So most of our old archives are housed at the University of Baltimore. This was before my time, but they didn't have space here, so they sent it to them, and they are getting grants and slowly digitizing all this.
Yeah.
And we have like from 89 on here internally, and we're doing digitizing these things. So, for example, when Brooks died, Brooks Robinson, we had more old stuff. Yeah. Because Brooks was part of our team. We used to do Oriole baseball.
Yeah.
And so we have found this gold mine of archives. So we do a show called The Vault. We run it on streaming. And, we do like an episode almost every week. And we find, different things that happened at this time of this year or whatever. And there's, we think, and we're just scratching the surface on that. But it's really, there are some neat things. But something like that was found through The Vault.
Someone shared it.
I mean, great stuff. And look, if there's a town, I'm not an original, I'm an adopted Baltimorean, but if there's a town that embraces its past and its rich history and all the things, and you guys having the ability to tell those stories, it's this town. I think that'll continue to resonate and serve you well, serve your citizens well. So, Bill Hooper, Vice President, General Manager, WMAR, thank you so much for joining us on Spin is a Four-Letter Word. Have a beer with edition. Cheers. Emma, way to go. She's silent but deadly. Jen, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Spin is a Four-Letter Word. If you like what you hear today, please subscribe. Send us your feedback too. We want this to be interesting for everybody. And give us a follow @MaroonPR on Twitter and LinkedIn.